We have to wait and see how those mutations occur.
So thank you, Robert, for giving us the better grasp of what the coronavirus is, the family, the network within the coronavirus, how it tends to mutate so rapidly and so aggressively, and also how it is of much greater concern than the common flu. I wonder, having discussed briefly the sociological dimension, and this is going to take us forward as we talk about medicine and psychology, because those are both areas of your expertise. I wonder, with the sociology dynamic, if in part some of why a portion of our population, just trying to understand, will write it off as just equivalent to the common flu. I wonder if part of that write-off may be due, I don't ultimately know, but may be due to concerns over totalitarianism, that the limitation of freedom, because all of us are wired such that we have biases. I have biases. We all have biases that cause us to reflect upon data differently. As you and I are individuals who really like Jonathan Haidt's work with moral foundations and such, and autonomy, freedom, equity, different kinds, and maybe also then there's the matter of what we trust, authority, and maybe some don't trust what the scientific community might say. I mean, it could be a combination of factors. I don't know if you wish to speak to that, because I think that is such a fascinating point you raise about totalitarianism and how are we going to navigate both our concern as Americans and people more broadly for freedom, but also you have to lock down this virus, keep it contained so it doesn't spread and mutates, so rapidly, regionally, nationally, internationally. But just if you could speak to that issue of how that might shape our biases about freedom, totalitarianism, trust. What sources of authority do we trust? Faith, science, etc. Could you speak to that just briefly, please?
Yes, indeed. In fact, over the past week, on a weekly basis, I produce a little, what I call a post rather than a blog, and I write out perhaps 3 pages of commentary over a certain portion of the scripture. And right now I'm working through Galatians. And in the Galatians letter, Paul is inviting us into freedom. Then he says, well, once you're free, you don't use your freedom for self-indulgence. What do? You use it for radical obedience to another law, the law of Christ, which is the law to bear one another's burdens. This pandemic is a exercise in seeing to what extent we can bear one another's burdens. Can we set aside our own desire to be free and do whatever we want to, and put ourselves into social isolation, and to move about more carefully, to move about only with gloves on or with masks on or only to certain places? This is a test to what extent can we lay aside our individualistic idea of freedom, which is to do whatever we jolly well please, or as Paul suggests, moving towards self-indulgence, and instead do what is good for all of us together. To me, the pandemic is a test of the moral possibilities of the human being. If the human being is able to set aside the most precious parts of our freedom, which is a freedom to enjoy our self-interest, to bring about a freedom of another kind of freedom, the freedom to join in with one another and lay aside what we privately want for freedom for the sake of one another, and therefore fulfill the law of Christ. I think this is an exercise in moral testing, and how we come out of this and how we then prepare for the next pandemic, which surely will come. It will come sooner or later, who knows when, but it will come, and we will once again have to set aside our individual freedoms for the freedom of acting on behalf of everyone, and thus fulfilling the law of Christ that we bear one another's burdens. I think this needs to be thought of as a moral exercise.
Thank you, Robert. As we move forward in our discussion, what are symptoms of the coronavirus, and what should be done as one experiences those symptoms? We see a lot of it